Okay, so this is section 1.2, chapter 1, section 1.2, economic models, more review. In my opinion, this section is quite philosophical. We can't skip it, but I don't take it too seriously. It's not that, it's just I know that I'll say it 10 times in a row, but with any models or economic models, it's always better to learn through examples. The description of any of this stuff is quite wordy and philosophical, so we'll go over the paragraphs right now, and then it mentions some of the most fundamental concepts like supply and demand. In one of our previous videos, we already kind of defined the supply and demand graph. So anyways, all I'm really saying is, it's kind of a lot of philosophical jargon, but it's not a poli-sci class or anything, but it's kind of similar to that, where economics simply involves a lot of idealism. So it just has to be by a university professor, and this textbook is by a university professor. Uh, okay, so 1.2, economic models. We will be interested in considering many complex real-world economic phenomena. In order to focus on the fundamental economic principles at work, it will be both necessary and desirable to take the scientific approach of constructing an abstraction or a model of each situation that we wish to study. The motivation of this approach is that a model provides the analysis with a clear, the analyst with a clear and logical, consistent framework that can be used to ask and answer through a process of logical deduction. Interesting economic questions. Further, the answers to the questions asked of the model, which might be called the model's predictions or implications, can be subjected to empirical tests in order to accept or reject the validity of the model. Without a model, much of this scientific work would be next to impossible to accomplish. The process of constructing a model to analyze a question of interest, a task, or a problem is common in our everyday lives. This is kind of more like giving a basic example or something. It all kind of explains the scientific method. But if you wanted to build a bookshelf to house your books and electronic equipment, you would probably first sketch a plan before visiting the lumber yard to purchase the materials. The plan is a model. If you wanted to sew an article of clothing from fabric, you would probably utilize a paper pattern. This is a model. The use of a satellite navigation system when you take a trip represents the use of a model. A prototype automobile, a Barbie doll, and a three-dimensional architectural model represents additional examples of models. So, formally, an economic model can be thought of as a set of assumptions describing a simulated economic system. The assumptions constituting the model represent an abstraction from or a simplification of reality. We would craft our assumptions so as to focus on the essential features of the real world environment that we wish to describe. And essential features that, what does it say? Inessential features that do not form the essence of the reality that we wish to analyze would be ignored or posited as being fixed. Something in Latin, who cares? Only the forces and mechanisms that the model's assumptions describe would be allowed to operate. The model would then constitute a simulated and simplified world apart from reality. So we have examples that are better, exactly what I just read. I'm not quite sure. Okay. An example of an economic model is the simple supply and demand paradigm. In this model, we describe a market by assuming that the demand for a commodity can be described by a function, which states that market quantity demanded is a decreasing function of price, and that market quantity supplied is an increasing function of price. Okay, so, I'm obviously just kind of reading this thing aloud. We're going to kind of continue here, equilibrium in a market. Um, but some of the most wordy things are very, very easily described in the graph. If we view one of the previous videos, we did just, I would say that we've gone over supply and demand in great detail, but it's actually very easy. So it's just a very small handful of details to understand the graph and the basic concept between, supply and demand and equilibrium. But we talk about all this, but I think this is all better stated in a previous video. So equilibrium in a market would then be characterized a situation in which the demand and supply schedules intersect. At a given price, the quantity which demanders are willing and able to purchase is equal to the quantity of the product which suppliers are willing to supply. Now, neither of these demand or supply functions actually exist in reality. However, this simple model proves to be useful in predicting price and quantity changes in real-world markets. Once a model is constructed, the economic analyst then posits questions that are of interest. In the navigation example, one asks how best to travel from one point to another in a city. Further, we might want to know how long our trip will take and how many miles we will travel. Using the navigation system, we would plot out a course and get an estimate of the travel time and mileage. The system would use all available information. The system would use all available information such as road type and travel and time of travel. In the supply demand example, one might be interested in predicting the future price of a commodity given current changes in a particular market. If, for example, we expect to see a restriction in supply, downward shift in the supply schedule, we actually did write out this example briefly, and an increase in demand, an upward shift in demand schedule, then we would use our model to predict a higher market clearing price in the future. The answers to questions asked of our model are termed the model's implications or predictions. Implications are logically deduced from assumptions of the model. The implications of a model can be used to develop hypotheses about how the real world operates. These hypotheses can be tested against actual data and rejected or accepted. If an empirically testable hypothesis is accepted by statistical tests, then we have validated our model. We have shown that its predictions hold up or are descriptive of an actual economic process. This is the procedure used by most mainstream economists to judge the usefulness of an economic model. This methodology is called by some logical positivism, if we want to look that up. And it is fairly mainstream in the economic profession. I'm just going to take a moment to look ahead here.